Welcome to a new episode. This episode, we're going to start with a new book, a new trilogy by Anthony Ryan called The Pariah. At least the first book's called The Pariah. We discovered Anthony Ryan a number of years ago. When did we read that other trilogy? I don't even remember the name of it.
I think it's called The Tower Lord. Well, actually, that's the name of one of the books, but the Blood Song.
But we read those a long time ago,
when he was first writing them, we read them, and then after that series, we kind of just stopped following him, and he's written a bunch of books.
Yes, it kind of sucks to do that sometimes, but it's good for us right now because now we got a whole trilogy that's finished.
Yeah,
I don't have to worry about the next book coming out.
On the way for nothing.
That is one of the hardest things to do as a reader, is to wait all the years for the author to put out the next book. It also sucks too when you will know people who don't wait for the books to come out and they just read it as they come out, and then they're talking about it and you're like, shut up.
I think it's the worst when there's a series you love and then it becomes obvious that the author might never ever finish it. Like Patrick Rothfuss, I think is
that's exactly where I went.
Infamous for that, and I think George R. R. Martin is. I didn't really read what's it called, the Song of Ice and Fire series, Game of Thrones. I haven't read the books, so I don't know if he's finished the series, but I know that he was infamous for not finishing the last book, but I don't know if he did. I'm Googling it because I want to know. Oh, he's yet to finish writing the last 2 books in the series. So he's got a ways. 2 books,
that's still less than 5.
I don't know what stops these guys, because, you look at other authors, they just have, tons and tons of books. I go to, Barnes & Noble, and I see, the shelves are full of authors that just have, books everywhere.
I've always had this, idea that when they first start writing, they're writing because they want to write, they want to be an author and stuff like that, but they're also, driven by, I need monies. But then they write a hit series, and then they... Maybe in the case of George R. R. Martin, where his series was popular and then it was made into a really successful TV show. So now he's just man, I'm going to go to the beach.
Yeah, didn't he work on Elden Ring too?
I wouldn't be surprised. It seems like something
up
his alley, but I don't know.
I thought he helped write it, but I'm not sure. The story.
If he did, then no wonder it was good.
Right. So, yeah, maybe that's part of it. But even really, really good popular artists like Stephen King. He's really popular, and he writes books
Yeah.
I guess his aren't really a series, though, are they? They're just kind of standalone mystery books.
I feel like that's what it mostly is. I feel like...
So maybe that's a little easier than that.
I'm not a big Stephen King fan. His books are really weird.
I've never read any of his books.
His books are not the typical kind of book. I think I can enjoy a thriller, mystery, horror, whatever, but not from Stephen King. I don't know. Maybe I can't really judge. I read his book It, that was the movies were based off of, and I was just that was ugh.
I think for me, I've noticed it's a weird thing, a phenomenon, if you will, that happens with me. If I read a book and then watch the movie, if I read the book first and then watch the movie second, I think 100% of the time I like the book way better, even if I like the movie. But the inverse is also true. If I watch the movie first and then read the book that movie was based on, I don't like the book that much.
Interesting.
It happened to me with Lord of the Rings.
No way.
I watched the movies first and then read the books. I like the books, but I'm definitely not into them. I don't really have any interest in reading any of the other extra stuff that Tolkien wrote. I don't even know what it's called.
The Simlaracum or something.
Yeah, I don't really have any interest in that. And the first books, I read them, but it just didn't really grip me. And then the same thing happened with Dune. I'd never really heard of Dune. And then I watched the movie, the new one. I realized after watching the new one that there's an old Dune, but I watched the new Dune movies, the ones that just got released in 2 parts, and then read the book. And I was I did not like the book really at all, to be honest. I know it's a really popular science fiction book, and I'm not saying it was bad. I don't know what it is about me.
That's really interesting.
Just from those examples, when I watched the movie first, I didn't like the book as much.
So if you were
Also, I guess both of those books were like older books, which I don't really like. The
older books are hard to read, in my opinion. I tried to read like H.G. Wells, which is way old.
Yeah.
And it's really hard. 'Cause it's crazy. He was around a long time ago. It was like, well, over 100 years ago. I don't remember if it was like 150 or 120 or whatever, but like the English they used back then was even so far different that you have to really concentrate, and it takes me forever to read his books.
Yeah, and it's like more dialogue focused, which I'm usually okay with, but I mean, like for example, if I remember correctly, it's been several years since I've read Return of the King, and I know there's like diehard fans, so hopefully I don't like piss anyone off. But if I remember correctly, the whole Battle of Pelennor Fields and like Minas Tirith was like 2 or 3 pages. And so
That's
it was like the equivalent of, oh no, they're in trouble, and then the Rohirrim charged, and they were victorious, and it was just like that. And then it went on to like more dialogue and stuff.
Huh.
And so, I think I almost consider it more of like a literature than like a fantasy book. Which I don't know the technical difference, but to me, literature is like these authors in their time were very instrumental, and they were like really good, and they understand English really well. And then fantasy, I view as like this author is telling a story that's just meant to be entertaining. There's not necessarily any like larger world, culture, social connections. Like there's obviously going to be some because they live in the social and society, but it's not like why the book is written. Like, like all the books you read in school, like Brave New World, that was like warning about stuff, and in Fahrenheit 451, that was like warning about stuff. Like, I don't know. Probably totally off base, but that's just my dang opinion. And I just thought of this too, because The Hobbit, I read The Hobbit and freaking loved the Hobbit book, and I hate the Hobbit movies. That's probably just because they.
I hear that a lot about the people who are Lord of the Rings fans, because it's just like it's so different from the book. They didn't change just a little bit; they changed a lot. Yeah. And I actually, a few months ago, maybe the middle of last year, I reread The Hobbit because I found out that Andy Serkis voiced it, so I was like, it's perfect chance to listen to it.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it didn't even feel the same. Like the names were there, and that was about it.
Oh, really?
Like I don't know. That's what it felt like. It just seemed like it seemed completely different than the movies.
Mm. Especially because this is a relatively tiny book, and to be made into 3 movies, like 3 like 2-hour movies. Yeah. So they definitely had to have made it embellished and changed things. They probably added storylines. Like I think I heard like the Battle of the 5 Armies was like a big thing that they just
that never happened.
Oh, the whole thing didn't even happen. So
I don't think so.
I didn't realize that.
I read it recently, and I am already like, did it happen? I feel like
and all
it
like the
happen.
side things, like whenever like I think pretty sure the book only follows Bilbo and the dwarves.
Yeah.
Like it never switches to Gandalf's perspective, and there's like a whole thing.
No,
where
it never
Gandalf,
does.
It shows like Radagast,
and like everything involving Legolas is completely made up. He's not in the book at all.
Oh, he isn't.
No.
That's funny.
I don't.
He
might have been mentioned. I'm just saying to cover my bases, but
so
he's not in it at all.
Did what's his name really fall in love with the elf?
Not that I remember.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I think that was a new thing too.
I need to reread this book now.
Yeah.
So I read the book forever ago and then watched the movie more recently. So I remember the movie more. But
so if you were going into like a new series, like maybe you heard about a movie that came out that it was based on a book, and you knew nothing about the book or the movie, would you be like, I'm going to read the book and then I'll watch the movie, or would you choose to watch the movie first and then read the book?
Honestly, if I was like legitimately interested, I would go with the book. Just because in my lifetime of experience, the movie is never fully faithful to the book. And honestly, like I'm pretty okay with that. I understand that transforming a book into a movie with actors and scripts and visual and like movement is totally different than a book. Like a book, like you're in the character's mind, you know what they're thinking, and so you don't really have to have like, you don't have to like explain things. Like you can't do that same level of detail in a movie and make it like, that would be kind of awful. And so I understand that there are going to be differences, but what I don't like is when those differences are decided by people who only care about trying to make money. And so they're trying, rather than trying to say, how can we change this in a way that remains faithful to the intent of the story and the intent of the characters and the author while adapting it to this and make it work, rather than saying, how do we take the name of this book and make money off of it by doing a movie? Yeah. Every time they've done that, the movies have been absolutely atrocious. Eragon, worst movie I've seen in my entire life, like almost bar none. And that's with reading the book. Like as far as like this in this comparison, it was like a book translated to a movie. More recently, the Wheel of Time series is just awful. I literally felt. I've never felt this way. Usually I'm like, oh, that was terrible. But for some reason, the Wheel of Time, just because like the Wheel of Time has been like so central to my fantasy journey, like Robert Jordan is what got me into high fantasy, epic fantasy, and got me into loving the way he writes. I know a lot of people don't like how he's so long-winded, but I do. And then to see it portrayed like it was in Wheel of Time, when the things they decided to change and what they added, it was just, I just felt like almost insulted and like disgusted. It was like beyond just like, that was a stupid movie, like that, like, and then complaining about it. Like I am like literally repulsed by the Wheel of Time series.
Yeah.
And I was excited because I was like, Rosamund Pike, she's a totally awesome Moraine. Like that's a really good pick. That's really good casting for Rosamund Pike. But then like Loyal, who's the Trolloc, or not the Trolloc, the Ogier, he just looks not like an Ogier at all. And then the one thing I did like though, the Trollocs looked really creepy.
Yes. So. Sometimes they get little things right, but yeah, Amazon did not get enough right.
Yeah. But once I think did it right, and this is my opinion, is I think Lord of the Rings was done right. I know they added some things and changed some things, but I think Peter Jackson and those original trilogies did good at staying true to like, what is this story? What is the story? And I know they were focusing on money, but that wasn't like the only reason. But like almost any YA book that I read just was terrible. Like to be 100% honest, in middle school I read the Twilight books and I liked them. I thought they were pretty good. And the movies are awful. Mm-hmm. I couldn't even finish the first one. It was just bad.
Yeah.
I didn't watch any of the other ones.
Yeah,
and I have absolutely no desire to. Divergent was another one. I read those books. I read them as part of a class.
A class.
I took a class in college called Dystopian Literature. That was pretty good. And it was like the professor gave us all a list and we voted and people chose to read Divergent as a class, as part of like the class. So I read it and it was all right. It was pretty good. And the movie was just awful. It's just, yeah. And so I think that's where like, I don't know, just like the whole experience. This is kind of like a rant.
Like Aragon was one of the worst movies done. And it I don't know what happened there, if it really was just one of these things where like we just need to make money, or if like some director or producer or whoever it is that makes the decisions got their hands on that book.
If I remember correctly, I think Christopher Paolini signed away any rights to have a say in it. I think that's what happened, which is really unfortunate because I think he was super young when it happened.
Probably. I mean, like, I don't remember when it came out, but he was super young.
He was in high school when he wrote Aragon, I thought.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too.
Remember, that was a big deal to us because we were like we were younger than that, and we're like, holy crap, this guy's in high school and he wrote this awesome book. Like that's so cool.
Yeah.
Aren't they doing a Disney partnered with Amazon or something to do a
Disney is what I've heard.
Oh, Disney to do a TV series?
I assume it's still up, but he had like a video he released on probably Instagram and TikTok, I think, where like he said like, oh hey, I'm redoing Aragon with Disney. We're gonna make a TV show out of it. I'm just like, please be good.
That's another thing. I don't like the TV show approach.
Oh really?
I think
it can be good.
You could probably do it right, but I don't know. TV shows have a tendency to get more dramatic. I like a movie that we're like driving towards an end.
Yeah.
And maybe if they do it like season 1 is book 1, season 2 is book 2, but they almost never seem to do it that way when a movie gets turned into a book.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Or when a book gets turned into a book.
I would want them to do that. They need to do book 1 is a season, book 2 is a season.
Oh, I thought of another one that I hated. Friggin' Dresden Files got a few episodes.
God. That was terrible. That one really made me upset because like the first book is Stormfront and the first episode was Stormfront and they only did one episode for an entire book. And then from what I don't even remember because it was like one of those things like I watched it and deleted it out of my mind. But It seemed like all the other stuff was just complete BS that they made up.
Yeah, I remember his staff was a hockey stick.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and his blasting rod was a drum stick like you play drums with. Like, are you kidding me? He has to like carve these magical objects and carve the runes in them and make it. What the frick? is going? Oh, I was so mad. I'm not surprised at all that series didn't get renewed. Like, it was a piece of garbage.
It was totally. And I remember Bob being just bad.
Oh.
But
I really hated Bob too, because I think they just got lazy. Like, they tried to make that series with like no budget, or they got greedy or something, because a hockey stick, a drumstick, and then Bob wasn't a talking skull. He was a guy who came out of the skull. It was just like the ghost thing, and it was like, that's stupid.
It was very stupid. Anyway, I don't even know how we got on this rant.
We always do, but that's good. Anyway, let's get into The Pariah.
The Pariah by Anthony Ryan.
Do you remember how you discovered Anthony Ryan? I don't remember.
I think I don't know if it was you or me. One of us saw the book at a library, Barnes & Noble, decided to pick it up and liked it, and then the other one of us.
It must have been you, because I remember you telling me about like Blood Song and stuff.
I think it was just one of those books where I was just looking for a book and started reading it and liked it.
Yeah. Well, I think The Pariah is right up our alley, because one of the things that happens a lot already is there's quite a bit of inner monologuing, talking about what's going on and stuff, which I've enjoyed. But this one is like to a whole new level, because it's like when the main character Alwyn is like having a conversation with someone else, it's like he says a sentence or two, maybe they say a sentence or two, then there's like 3 paragraphs of like description going on in his head, and then the conversation picks back up, which I thought was done really well.
I definitely like the book, but it hasn't like fully gripped me yet. And I finally can tell what people are saying, because I know I heard like the majority of the reviews I've heard of Anthony Ryan are Blood Song was just the best book of the century, and then all his other books are just trash. And I didn't think that when I read the whole Blood Song series. I feel bad I don't remember what it's called, but like the Tower Lord, Queen of Fire, and I don't remember what the other one is.
Wasn't it Blood Song, Tower Lord, Queen of Fire?
Oh, there are 4. There's only 3.
Now I feel bad because I don't remember, but
anyway, but this, I can definitely tell this. This is a good story. I'm interested in the story. I want to know what happens with the story, but it doesn't feel like the Blood Song quality. I just don't know what it was about Blood Song that was just like so good. It's like one of the best books I've read. I would definitely say it's in my top 20. But anyway, yeah, it's good. It's kind of like a grimdark Robin Hood.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what it feels like. I don't think that's what the story's going to be. I don't think that's what the story's going to be. But that's kind of how it's. That kind of seems like Alwyn's life.
It's definitely. It feels that way, definitely, but definitely darker, because like Robin Hood, he would only really steal from, and he'd only steal from like the rich, who were already like these corrupt, higher up people who had laws and armies behind them to force like the peasant type people to be oppressed and give up everything they had so that they could be rich and stuff. Like, but these guys, Alwyn's band of outlaws, they're just
outlaws.
They're just outlaws. Yeah,
they're not.
They definitely they steal from some of the rich and stuff, but like they like within the first few chapters they've like killed innocent people and stuff, who maybe aren't super innocent, but they're like not actively fighting them. They just like, we need to kill these guys. Get they're dead.
And apparently, they live in this huge forest. I forget the name of the forest, but they live in this huge forest, and there's a bunch of different bands of outlaws throughout different parts of the forest, and then there's an outlaw king, and it's the outlaw king that Alwyn, he's part of his direct band of people, and it seems like there's like a little over 100 of them, so a decent sized group.
It's a bigger band of like outlaws than you see normally. Usually there's this little group of people or something, but these guys had to.
It's like a full-on like society.
Yeah, they had a little village type of thing.
So at first it's kind of like, okay, so this is going to be like kind of like an outlaw book, and even the cover makes it. He kind of seems like an outlaw on the cover, or like some rogue type guy, rogue ranger.
I get a rogue vibe from him.
Yeah, I definitely think any D&D person would be satisfied as that as their character art if they played a rogue.
Yeah, definitely.
But it definitely takes the story definitely takes a turn. What's the bandit leader's name again? Clint. Dent.
Decken Skull.
Dang, I was way off. I don't know why. So Decken Skull, it turns out he is the bastard son of a duke in the area. and that his father is, there's like some, we kind of hear like little Alwyn. He's still a kid. I don't remember if it says exactly how old he is. He's probably somewhere between 15 and 18, I would say.
Yeah.
Probably closer to like 16 or 17, but somewhere he's young. But he's really observant and curious and good at reading nonverbal communications.
Yeah.
And so Decken commonly uses him as like a spy and
He's
like
like a lie
kind of
detector
like
for
as
him.
an actor to set up things. Like it starts. I think the whole story starts with Alwyn pretending to be a crippled kid to stop a convoy.
Right.
But it turns out Decken has kind of in the background. So he kidnaps a royal messenger, which is apparently like super bad.
Yeah.
Like, don't want to do that.
Like that was grounds for being hanged already, I think.
Where they were like a thorn in the side, now it's like a huge problem. Like they're kind of like, oh, the king's definitely going to come after us now. But we learn through that and through other things Alwyn's able to pick up that there's like this larger conflict going on in the world. There was something called the Pretender Wars. There was like the Duchy Risings or something like that. And now there's like now it's the Pretender War. And it's just kind of like a land in constant turmoil. There's just seems like constant wars, constant strife.
Yeah, like when one feud goes down, something else comes up.
Yeah,
and
so
then,
with that on the larger picture, a band of outlaws, like it's pretty grim to live in this band. Like,
yeah, definitely.
as long as you don't make Decken mad, you can pretty much do whatever the heck you want. There's like a pretty strict pecking order where you can like beat up people below you if they try to stand above them. And Decken has like a wild, unpredictable temper where he could just like kill you on a whim.
Yeah.
And it's like definitely not a merry band of men. Like
No.
It is a very crappy situation to be in. But Alwyn's okay with it because he's the son of a whore, doesn't even know who his mom is. He was raised in a whorehouse, and when he got to a certain age, the master of the whorehouse, the pimp, kicked him out, and Decken found him. And so he kind of feels that loyalty to Decken. He feels almost grateful, like views Decken almost as a father figure.
Yeah. An abusive father figure, because it's like, even though he talks about several times how even though like Decken would beat him whenever, if he was needed to punish her on a whim or something, he still was very loyal to Decken. And near the end of part 1, he's just like, oh, I can only think of the good moments, even though he beat me.
Yeah.
So he sounded kind of like an abused child to me.
Yes, he definitely did. Definitely does. But yeah, and Decken, he has larger ambitions. He wants to become a duke. And so he decides to assemble all of the outlaw bands to form some sort of ragtag army. And he wants to kind of insert himself into the chaos of the larger world with the Pretender War and become a duke. And so then you're like, oh, okay, that's what the story's about. Like, just kind of navigating through that.
Yeah.
And then, nope.
Very much no. I wasn't expecting the flip. I was definitely expecting something like that. Because if we go off like the summary of this, it was saying something like he can he go from outlaw to warrior. So I thought, just reading that, like he was gonna go from Decken's outlaw henchman person to Decken's soldier.
Yeah, I kind of thought that same thing, but nope.
That was quickly.
Yeah, like seriously, like a week after he forms everyone, if even that, he forms them and they travel to a town, and in that town, it turns out they were betrayed by someone, we don't know who. Alwyn has some suspicions that it was one of the other outlaw bands. But anyways, they're completely ambushed by not just men-at-arms. So the men-at-arms are kind of like just pretty much like almost like farmers that are given swords and then trained a little bit to be like the Duke's men. And then there's King's soldiers who are actual, like, they're a little better trained, have a little better equipment, a little better discipline, and like can hold a line. But they're attacked by both of those groups of people. And everyone is just completely killed.
Yeah, like pretty much everyone's wiped out, and then like you find out Decken survived and he's killed, and then you find out some other guy, I think his name was Wraith, still survived, and then he was killed. So killed. Right now, where we're at,
it's kind of a whirlwind of events because it's like chaos when they get attacked, and so Alwyn runs. He runs to like this outlaw bolt hole type place. and finds like some food and things. But then he's like, I'm going to avenge Deccan. So he decides to go to the city where these people came from. And then he finds out that Deccan was captured and he's about to be executed. And he attends the execution. And then he gets all depressed and goes to a tavern. And then some soldiers recognize him because earlier in the story he had...
he was sent to go spy.
He was sent to go spy and gather information for Deccan with some other outlaw idiot. And the outlaw idiot's like a full-on sociopath that just likes killing. And so because of him, they had to end up killing 2 soldiers. And then Alwyn took a pendant from one of those soldiers. And it turns out that pendant was uniquely made by that soldier's mom. And another soldier, his brother, saw it and was like, you killed my brother, you son bitch.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, then they start killing Alwyn and he's like getting hung. And he's like, and that's why my voice, and that's why, dear reader, my voice is still raspy to this very day. So, that's another thing I don't think we mentioned. This story seems like old Alwyn telling us his life story.
Right.
He almost dies, but then he gets saved by a knight.
Saved.
Yeah, he gets saved by the knight, coincidentally, that executed Deccan, and who Alwyn had decided he was going to go get revenge on. But he's saved by him, at least from dying. But then the knight's like, well, you did kill a soldier, so I'm not going to execute you. I'm not going to let these guys kill you. But because you assaulted them, because you punched them, even though it was obviously self-defense, completely ridiculous, you had to go spend a day in a pillory, which sucked. And then after that, he got, I don't know if he was sold or just...
I think it was part of his punishment. Because I think the thing that sucks is Deccan seemed to know this knight, and just before he executed him, it was actually his request to be executed by this knight. He requested that he help Alwyn and escape, but then
so they knew each other because they both served in
that.
the army together. Like they both started at the same time, and like rose, and then he became a knight, and Deccan left and became an outlaw.
Yeah, but I think it was something because like.
But you're right though, because Deccan before he got killed asked him to take care of.
Yeah, but it was something because like he got identified as someone who ran with. Alwyn got identified as one of Deccan's like outlaw people, so then he couldn't be helped, and this knight couldn't help him escape and get out of there, start a new life somewhere.
Yeah.
So
he's consigned to essentially slavery until death. He has to go to an ominous sounding place, called the Pits.
The Pits. And of course, being a Brandon Sanderson fan, I can't get the Pits of Hathsin out of my brain.
Right. It's almost the equivalent, but so the Pits are basically a big like ore and iron mine, or I don't know, how that works, but it's something like that.
Right.
And you get it's like a walled off, like a prison, and you just pretty much work there till you die. Like it's known that nobles and leaders and government people potentially put people in that they want to get rid of and don't want to have around. You're a nuisance. And also it seems like every once in a while they'll empty the prisons and the dregs of the prisons to go work there.
Sounds like a delightful job.
Sounds like an awful journey to get there too.
Yeah, geez.
So he's just shoved in a cage where you can't even sit upright. So he's like lay down in this cage next to this like dying guy and some lady.
I'm actually like, this just shows how brutal this world is she's young. She's young. I want to say she's like 12 or 13, maybe 14.
Oh, I thought she was Deccan's age.
No, she was young. I remember he mentioned several times how young she was.
I thought she just looked young because she was so skinny.
Was it that?
I think so. Maybe
it was that.
Another thing to mention about Alwyn is he's a full-on, you can tell he's a kid raised around
outlaws,
wicked men. Because he does have very selfish tendencies. I don't really think he's necessarily like a good, decent kid. He's definitely on like the not so decent guy, but like he's better than, because there was that guy Urshel, who was his outlaw partner, who he's not as bad as that guy, because Urshel was kind of just like, I just want to kill because it's fun. Like Deccan's not like that. He'll kill when it's like necessary, but otherwise it's something he'll probably avoid, and then he's only going to kill if he needs to, or if it's going to have some advantage for him. But just to give you a little idea of Alwyn's character, is when he's like been beat up, he's like barely conscious, and he first notices this girl. He's like, oh, there's a girl there, but she's kind of ugly, so I didn't feel any lust toward her.
Yeah.
So like the first thing he looks at, he sees a woman, he's like in a cage. Before he even notices that he's in a cage driving somewhere, he sees this woman and decides if he wants to have sex with her or not.
Yeah. And I thought and it continues with that. He keeps bringing it up. I think there's like 3 or 4 times where he mentions
almost every time he sees a
girl,
woman, that thought goes through his head.
Yeah, but even specifically with Pariah, I think her name is, where like when they finally get to the pits, he like puts his arm around her, and it was the first time he touched her, and like the week he knew it, and he's like, oh, and it still didn't activate my lust or whatever the heck you say. I was like, okay.
But I mean, it makes sense though. I mean, if you think about it, he was the son of a prostitute and was raised from a baby in a whorehouse where their business is sex. And if this is anything like I've seen other portrayals of brothel children, they aren't shielded or kept away from anything that happens.
Yeah, I mean, the way that this book has been set up so far, I wouldn't be surprised if that was something that he was.
Yeah, and especially because he didn't know which of the whores was his mom. He was just kind of like there.
Because he was raised in the one his mom was at, right?
Yeah, but he didn't know which one was his mom. I'm pretty sure he said that.
That would be interesting.
And then he also didn't know how old he was.
Oh,
and he wasn't given a name. He gave himself the name Alwyn when he was old enough. So if you think about how, like, I'm pretty sure, I'm thinking of my kids. Maybe when they're 3 or 4, they could maybe think of a name to call themselves. Maybe 5. And so
I thought he was younger I thought he was like a pretty young kid, like 4 or 5.
He not when he was kicked out,
but when he came up with his name.
Yeah. And then so if you think about that, like that many years not even having a name, and like he even talked about like interacting with the men that were waiting in line to go do it with the whores, and like he would have to like avoid the cranky ones that would try to hit him. Like, so that kind of life, it kind of makes sense why maybe he's like a little more, he just views women and the relationship between men and women is just purely sexual and nothing really else to go on.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. Which I hated that it was kind of like that, where he would talk about his lust, because there was even like a girl in the Outlaw band that he tried to pursue, and if he couldn't get her, then he was like, hey, well, which one of these other girls can I go?
Yeah, like during the meeting, he's all like, which one of these, where's a prospect?
Yeah. But that, I hated that, and I was like, do we have to have this? But actually, I think that's a pretty deep thinking addition to the story that you'd have to intentionally do to, like, oh, he was raised in a whorehouse. Maybe he's going to be, he's not going to view women like.
He literally went from a whorehouse to being brutally kicked out and left for dead from the whorehouse to being picked up by a evil, brutal outlaw gang.
Which is like, yeah, do what you want.
And so he's not going to be a good person.
Yeah.
Like maybe he'll turn into a good guy, but I think it's always going to be colored by self-preservation, selfishness, and just trying to do what's best for him. I don't know if he's ever going to be like a good character, which I'm fine with that. If that's the story, that's the character we're dealing with, then I think Anthony Ryan does pretty good at portraying that when you like step back and kind of think about what's going on.
Which is actually one part of this book so far that I think is interesting. Is kind of you got like a guy who is usually maybe considered like the antagonist, and he probably is more of an antagonist type character, but he's in the protagonist position. Mm-hmm. And even though he's like a criminal and he's killed and he's stolen and he runs around women like they're toys.
Even when he meets an old woman, like normally when someone meets an old woman, they're described as matronly or grandmotherly. He described her as too old to be attracted to and want to have sex with.
Yeah. So it's just interesting.
Just another insight.
Yeah. Oh, freaking Alwyn.
So yeah, and then we're put in the pits where it seems like he's going to be there forever, but he is very resolved to escape. He wants to escape, and he comes up with some half-cracked idea that's so super weak and obviously not going to work. But his initial plan is to hint that he has a map to Deccanscarl, the Outlaw King's hidden stash of treasure, which doesn't exist because he says it to the girl that was with him. He's like, no, it's like, since we got money, we spent it. Like, we didn't keep any of it. As soon as we got it, we were buying stuff, or it got stolen by someone else.
Which makes sense. What kind of thieving criminals And it's like, I want to start a savings plan with the things that I steal.
But he like tries it right when he gets there. He talks to the guards and he's all like, I have like a thing. And they like kick him and they're like, everyone who comes in here has a map to something. Like, shut up.
That's funny because that's a story I've never heard before. So they're like, oh, I hear that all the time. I'm like, nah.
And then he learns later on that the guards are like really well paid.
Oh,
and, like don't even care.
That's smart by the nobles, actually. That's funny. There has been one thing so far that I don't like about how this book is written, which is not like a huge deal, but like we talked about before, like spoilers are annoying and they suck. And the way that he tells the story through Alwyn, he like kind of spoils stuff. Like when after the outlaws were attacked and wiped out, he like his future self referred to his past self as like, oh, I thought I was doomed and I would never see Deck and Skull again. I was wrong on both counts. So it's like, okay, that spoils it. So first of all, Deck and Skull is still alive, and this is before you knew he was executed, or he was going to be executed. So it kind of ruined that, and there was no surprise like, oh, Deck and Skull's alive. Oh no, he's going to be executed though. And then there was this whole thing like he obviously survives. I mean, maybe that was already an obvious thing because it's Alwyn is the main character. It's like, obviously he's going to survive, or else the story would be like, oh, and did you like my book? No.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings. I think it's the delivery that kind of is a little like, but I like the method of storytelling. Specifically, I really liked this story from Patrick Rothfuss because that's how Kavoth is telling his story. Because we meet Kavoth as like an older innkeeper, and then he goes back to tell his life story. So we know that everything that we learn that he tells in his stories, there's still like tension, but it's a different type of tension because we know he survives it. And it's more becoming like, okay, how did this lead to him being an innkeeper? What the crap? Like, how did he become an innkeeper? And how come he's so incredibly famous that this like scholar is searching out for him? Like, who is this guy? That's why I'm mad at Patrick Rothfuss not finishing it.
Seriously.
But, and there's like this whole thing. It's like, wow, that's really cool. And I think that's what Anthony Ryan is going for. I think he's more going for, he wants us to wonder, where's Alwyn now? Like, where's this leading to? Like, why is he telling us this story? Why do we care about this story? Like, who is this little outlaw kid whose life sucks and everyone's dying around him, and now he's a slave in a prison camp?
Yeah. So no, I totally agree. I like that way of telling the story. I just don't like him saying like, oh, I thought that was the last time I was going to say it, but he's actually alive and we're going to see him later. Like, don't say that. Yeah, like give me a surprise.
Yeah, like the delivery definitely could use some improvement for sure.
But that's the only part. There's been like a couple times where they kind of spoiled like, oh, this is not like you think this is what's going to happen, but actually I'm just going to give you one sentence like, actually this is not going to happen.
Yeah.
And something.
I think Patrick Rothfuss did it really well because there was like a bunch of places where there was a break. And then the reporter guy would be like, well, what happened? Like, did everything turn out okay? And he's all like, oh, I'll have to tell you tomorrow.
Yeah.
I have to think about how to explain it. And so it was like, it was still like that mystery. Like, you knew it obviously worked out somehow because he was there, but like you didn't know how. And so it added like that same level of intensity you get from not knowing what's going to happen was like there, which I think really worked. But, and it's almost there with the Pariah, but it's not quite.
Yeah. It's definitely still good though. I've been enjoying it so far.
Yeah, I think it's a good story, but you can definitely see the weaknesses as a writer, which I hate to see with writers that have so many books published. Like there's one writer, what the heck is his name? I've tried several of his books. Every time I go to Barnes & Noble, it's really like, and I've tried several of his books. I just can't freaking get into it. What's his name?
You talking about Joe Abercrombie?
No, not Joe Abercrombie.
I'm trying to think of one that because I think I've seen a similar author where his books just don't have any draw to me.
It's gonna bug the frick out of me. Sometimes I hate Google. I type in fantasy authors, and it shows me the best books in 2021. I'm like, I just want the list of authors.
Is it Terry Brooks?
Yes. Freaking A.
Okay. Took me a second to get there too.
He has so many books. Like they're everywhere. I see them like every library I go to, every Barnes Noble I go to, they're taking up like 2 shelves.
He has a ton of books.
And like I've tried reading a couple, and I just like cannot get into it.
Yeah. I don't know if I've tried his books, but I've never gotten curious enough to pull it off a shelf and try reading it.
But yeah, with Anthony Ryan, I think because he has the Bloodsong series, he has that Dragon series, he has this Pariah series, he has like a bunch of little shorter novels. And so that's like a decent collection of books, and it just kind of sucks to see, like, not really see, like, improvement. I don't know how to explain it, but...
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious, though, I'm curious to know why that is. Like, is that just how you feel like he's not improving, or maybe he is, and I don't know.
I'm not really I don't know how to describe it. It's just like, when you know, you know.
Yes.
But that's just my opinion. Anyway, so we only read up to part 2, that we're getting pretty close to the end there. Because in the pits, we kind of get what we're going to have in the next little bit of the story. I think we do learn from future Alwyn that he ends up being there for about 4 years. And he meets this old woman and her enforcer that are apparently... she's like a really high religious figure. Their religion is called like the Covenant, and they kind of believe in all these bunch of different martyrs that died and were resurrected and have like kind of like powers. It kind of seemed like Anthony Ryan was kind of poking at Christianity a little bit. Like kind of seems similar to that. Like Jesus was dead and then raised. But anyway, there's like a whole bunch of martyrs, but it kind of like almost seems like a combined Christianity and Greek mythology, like the pantheon. Yeah. Like there's like a ton of martyrs that did stuff, and they worship the martyrs, kind of like Christians worship Jesus Christ. But where was I going with this? Oh yeah, because she's like a super high level in that religion, and she like runs the whole place apparently. Because I guess the guards don't, and she even says the guards don't really care what we do in here as long as we mine and meet our quotas. Like they don't even care as long as we don't try to escape. But they are trying to escape, and they've dug like this huge tunnel, like this branching place, and they're trying to dig out, and she wants Alwyn to help. Because for whatever reason, when she first met him, the reasoning didn't really seem very airtight to me. It almost seemed kind of like, I need your help, newcomer, because you're the main character, and that's where the plot needs to go. It kind of felt weak to me, to be 100% honest.
Oh, okay. She didn't have a really good reason.
Where she met him, and within the first... 10 minutes of meeting him, she had made a decision to reveal this secret that if he goes out with it, then she'll be killed and ruin the whole entire plan. It kind of seemed weak to me. Just be like, I like you, kid. Come with me. I'm going to show you this huge secret. And
super trusting, maybe because she's religious.
Yeah. And just because she was like, there's something about you. You got kind eyes.
You got kind eyes.
So that felt kind of weak to me. I don't know. It doesn't really seem to be a reason why she decided to trust him with such a huge thing. But part 2, we'll probably see. I don't know if it's going to jump forward 4 years, or if it's going to be like
pieces,
or it's going to be like start at the beginning a little bit and then be like, and that's how it went for the next 4 years, and then it'd be like, and then all of a sudden we're ready to escape. I don't know how it's going to work, but I'm sure it's going to be about his experience in the pits.
You think? I wonder if
I don't know if the whole part's going to be that.
The entire part 2 will be like that.
I don't know. It could be, because you could say the part 1 is his outlaw time, part 2 is his time in the pits.
Maybe part 3 is his warrior time.
Next part 4 is his next part. I don't know.
Was there 4 parts? I thought there was only 3.
Oh, 3 parts, whatever it is. I was just kind of going. I don't actually know how many parts there are.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, that's part 1.
Yeah, part 1. So far, good book.
Yep.
I'm excited to go with it. See what happens.
Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll get into part 2. See how these pits of Nothathsin treat Alwyn. So